I used to believe the Air Force was a machine that rewarded order. You show up, you keep your head down, you follow checklists that could outlive a religion. But the older I got, the more I realized machines don't care who they crush, as long as the gears keep turning. My name's Evan Mercer, Staff Sergeant, Avionics Technician, 57th Aircraft Maintenance Squadron out of Hill AFB. If you've ever seen an F-35 taxi under a Utah sunrise, that was my office view. I kept the birds alive, the invisible ones that make pilots feel invincible. That's the irony. We fixed the wings that let everyone else fly, but we're the ones chained to the hangar. Back then, I thought loyalty could shield you. Turns out, it just makes for a bigger target. Claire Hastings came into my life during a thunderstorm that grounded half our flight line. She was a travel nurse contracting with a base clinic, coffee skin freckles, strawberry blonde hair always tucked under a messy bun. I met her when she stitched my hand after I caught it on a stripped panel latch. She told me I looked like the type who'd apologize to a jet after cursing at it. She wasn't wrong. For a while, life looked cinematic in that slow-motion military romance way. Late-night calls before morning PT, her laughter echoing across the barracks courtyard, road trips to the Great Salt Lake. She said she liked my quiet, the way I listened instead of filling silence. I didn't tell her the silence was training. Maintenance crews learned to hear danger in every hum. Then there was Dylan Reeves, my wingman, my brother-in-arms, and the last guy I'd ever think to watch my six around women. We'd done tech school together, same dorm, same ramen diet. He was louder, smoother, the kind of guy who could flirt with a colonel's wife and walk away with a commendation. I used to laugh about it. Back then, the first year rolled by like clockwork. Inspections, sorties, Friday beers at Murphy's Bar downtown. Claire started volunteering extra shifts at the clinic, sometimes pulling 16 hours. I didn't complain. Deployment orders were hovering over our squadron like storm clouds anyway. When they came, I was ready. 6-month rotation to Al Dafra, maybe Kandahar after that, Wexler said in briefing. He was the kind of captain who smiled while handing out bad news, all white teeth and recruiter energy. Volunteers get first pick on leave when you're back. I raised my hand before the sentence ended. Claire tried to hide her disappointment, but she knew what service meant. Or I thought she did. Deployment. It's a word that sounds heroic until you live it. Then it's just heat, noise, and the smell of jet fuel baked into your skin. At Al Dafra, we worked 12 on, 12 off, sometimes 36 straight when birds went down hard. We slept in plywood huts that rattled with every afterburner. You stop counting days. Only inspections and sorties matter. I kept a photo of Claire taped inside my tool drawer. The edges curled from desert air. She sent videos, her in scrubs laughing, saying, "Hurry home, flyboy." It kept me sane. But halfway through the rotation, Dylan started acting weird on video calls. He'd laugh off my questions, say, "Don't worry about things stateside, man. Focus on the mission." I assumed he meant bills or gossip. I didn't realize he meant her. It began small, maintenance logs not matching up. One jet's avionics readings showed a fault code I'd already cleared the night before. At first, I thought fatigue. Then another discrepancy. Then 3. Paper trails that didn't line up with flight data. When you're the one signing off those forms, you feel every bad number like a noose tightening. I flagged it to Wexler. He told me, "Handle your lane, Mercer. We can't have another grounding. Hire wants readiness above all." That phrase, above all, should have told me everything. I stayed up until dawn combing through system reports. Found that someone had backdated signatures under my login. Digital fingerprints matched my own because Dylan had access to my terminal during shared shifts. I confronted him in the maintenance bay, sweat streaking down my uniform. "What the hell, Reeves? You signing my name now?" He grinned, chewing sunflower seeds. "Relax, bro, paperwork shuffle." Captain said to expedite clearance. "You forged my initials. Or I saved your ass from a backlog. Depends how you spin it." He clapped my shoulder like we were still friends. That was the first time I felt it. That cold pulse behind the ribs that whispers something's off. 2 weeks later, my secure comm pinged. Subject: Inquiry, Avionics Data Integrity, Mercer, E. I was under investigation for falsifying maintenance logs. My stomach hollowed out. That's career-ender territory. If the brass decided I'd doctored flight readiness data, they could yank my clearance, maybe even court-martial. Wexler called me in, voice calm as a priest at confession. "Evan, these things happen. Own it and they'll go easy." "I didn't falsify anything, sir." He sighed. "Then who did?" When I said Dylan's name, his eyes flickered, just for a second, before sliding back into sympathy mode. "Let's not point fingers until the audit's complete." That was when I realized the system wasn't malfunctioning. It was functioning exactly as intended. That night, I called Claire. The connection lagged, her face pixelated. She smiled too quickly. "Hey, baby. You look exhausted." "Been worse," I said. "Listen, something's happening at work. They're saying." "Hold that thought." She looked off screen. "I'm covering double tomorrow. Can I call you after shift?" "Yeah, sure." The screen froze mid-smile, and then she was gone. That's when I noticed the reflection in her laptop screen. Just a blur, but it looked like someone walking behind her in my old Air Force hoodie. I told myself I imagined it. A week later, comms went down after a sandstorm. No calls for 4 days. By the time network came back, Claire's messages were short, clipped. "Sorry, crazy week. Just tired, nothing's wrong." I ignored the unease and focused on work. But word travels fast in military circles, faster than sound, slower than truth. One night, a crew chief tossed me his phone with a smirk. "Yo, Mercer, that your girl?" It was a social media post, Claire at Murphy's Bar, arm around someone in uniform. The tag read #57th strong. Dylan Reeves stood beside her, holding a beer, same grin he'd worn when forging my signature. I felt something crack quiet inside me, Not a snap, more like a slow unthreading. The kind that doesn't bleed right away. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't eat the next day. When the commander's summons hit my inbox, I already knew what it meant. Formal review, immediate suspension of access credentials, pending further inquiry. They grounded me, literally. No flight line, no tools, no clearance. They took my badge, my laptop, my nameplate from the maintenance roster. For someone whose whole identity was tied to fixing things, it felt like being erased. I spent hours pacing the barracks, writing statements nobody would read. Dylan avoided eye contact. Wexler smiled too easily. The desert heat pressed like judgment through every wall. When deployment ended, I was ordered home early for administrative reassignment. That's military for exile. I was placed on desk duty, inventory management. The techs called it death by spreadsheets. Every beep of the barcode scanner felt like another nail in the coffin of who I used to be. One evening, I walked past the flight line and saw Dylan smoking by the hangar doors. He looked up unfazed. You still sulking, bro? You tanked my career. He exhaled a lazy plume of smoke. Nah, you tanked yourself. You're just mad someone beat you at the paperwork game. You forged my name. That's fraud. He flicked dash toward the tarmac. Can't prove it. That's when I realized proof didn't matter. In this machine, reputation was reality. I kept my head down for weeks, hoping the noise would fade. But gossip metastasized. Airmen whispering that I'd falsified data to cover a maintenance delay. Command loved that version because it meant the problem ended with me. Then one morning, I got called to Wexler's office again. He gestured for me to sit, all friendly like we were teammates. Evan, HQ's closing the investigation. You'll receive a letter of reprimand, no court-martial. Consider it a mercy. I stared at the paper, official language polished enough to sound merciful while gutting my record. Permanent blemish. No re-enlistment. A career death sentence dressed as leniency. He leaned forward. You keep quiet, this stays internal. Make waves, and that letter becomes a discharge. Why protect Reeves? He smiled. Because he's useful. There it was. No pretense, no honor, just raw hierarchy. That night, I drove 2 hours into the desert until the base lights disappeared. I parked on an empty dirt road, stepped out, and screamed until my throat tore. No one heard. Even the stars looked indifferent. When I got back, I made a decision. If the system was going to bury me, I'd dig through their foundation until something collapsed. They say revenge isn't a mission in the Air Force. But when you've got nothing left to lose, even maintenance logs can become weapons. For weeks after that night in the desert, I moved like a ghost through the base. Nobody wanted to make eye contact. A few buddies mumbled, "Tough break, bro." The kind of sympathy that evaporates before it hits your skin. I started running long after lights out, 5, 6 miles until the world stopped sounding like static. It didn't help. The letter of reprimand went through, stamped with digital signatures that looked too neat to be human. My badge privileges shrank, my access to the avionics database revoked pending review. They stripped away everything that proved I knew what I was doing. I'd spent 8 years building that trust. It took them 3 sentences to erase it. Then one afternoon I got called to the legal office for clarification of incident details. Inside, a captain from JAG, young, polite, clipboard for a heart, handed me a folder. Staff Sergeant Mercer, we need confirmation you've been briefed on Article 107 implications. False official statements, I recited automatically. He nodded. Exactly. If any of your previous reports were embellished, it's better to amend them now. I stared at him. You're asking me to confess to something I didn't do? He smiled the way bureaucrats do when they're told to smile. I'm giving you an opportunity to resolve this quietly. There it was again, quietly. The word they use when they mean obediently. I walked out without signing. That's when I knew they weren't just protecting Dylan. They were protecting themselves. That night, I sat in my car outside Claire's apartment. I wasn't planning to go in. I just needed to see for myself what I already knew. Her lights were on. A familiar truck sat in her driveway. The same government-issue gray Tacoma Dylan drove. My throat went dry. I texted. Need to talk. Just 5 minutes. No reply. 5 minutes turned into 30. Then the porch light went out. That silence hurt worse than any reprimand. When you serve, you learn how to take orders, insults, even danger. But betrayal from someone who said she loved you? That one rewrites your DNA. I drove back to base with my hands locked on the wheel and the radio off, replaying every detail. The half-finished texts. The distant tone. The way Dylan smirked during formation. Every clue had been there. I'd just been too loyal to see it. The following week, Wexler announced he'd been selected for a deployment command position in Kuwait. Guess who else was on his team? Dylan Reeves. They needed experienced avionics personnel, apparently. Meanwhile, I was assigned to stay behind as support staff. I laughed when I read the orders. It sounded almost merciful. But mercy for men like Wexler always had strings. Deployment round 2. They shipped out mid-July. For the first time in years, I wasn't going anywhere. Part of me felt relief, the other part burned. Then, 3 weeks later, a message popped into my secure inbox from a name I didn't recognize, TSGTL, Benitez, stationed in Kuwait. Subject line. You don't know me, but I know your story. Inside was a single line. You were right about the logs. Same patterns happening here. Attached. 2 maintenance reports showing data discrepancies identical to mine. Same aircraft type. Same fake signatures. One of the digital initials matched Dylan's. My pulse hammered. Proof. Finally, I forwarded the files to my personal encrypted drive and deleted the message from base servers. If Wexler or Dylan were pulling the same stunt overseas, I could show command the pattern stretched beyond me. Except command wasn't who I trusted anymore. I reached out to the Inspector General hotline, careful to use personal channels off duty. The automated voice told me my report was logged as case #2147A and that someone will contact you within 10 business days. 10 days in bureaucracy time meant eternity. While waiting, I started piecing together everything from the first deployment, timestamps, comms logs, and even screenshots of messages from Claire where she mentioned working late with Dylan's team. I didn't want to drag her name through the mud, but the overlap was too suspicious to ignore. If Wexler had covered maintenance fraud while his team partied with civilian contractors, that was bigger than a love triangle. It was criminal negligence. Then came the random inspection. A base security officer showed up at my dorm unannounced, said they'd received a tip I might be in possession of unauthorized files. They confiscated my laptop and personal drive. When I asked for a warrant, he just smiled. Military property, Sergeant. We don't need one. They left my room looking like a hurricane hit it. 2 hours later, Wexler called me from Kuwait over a secure line. You've been busy, he said, tone calm but sharp. You monitoring my devices now? Just a friendly reminder that if someone falsified entries, digital fingerprints lingered. So I started digging. Every night after shift, I stayed in the office, pretending to clear backlog while cross-referencing old data pulls. That's when I found it. A shared directory hidden behind a mislabeled training folder. Inside, hundreds of maintenance authorizations marked verified under my name, dated after my access was revoked. Someone was still using my credentials overseas through mirrored logins. I copied everything to a flash drive the size of a dog tag and mailed it to myself at a civilian address under an alias. Then I deleted all traces of the search from the server. If they were going to erase me, I'd make sure the evidence survived first. 2 weeks later, the Inspector General's office finally responded, through a civilian liaison named Ms. Eileen Vargas. We arranged a meeting off-base, neutral ground, a coffee shop 30 miles from Hill. She was older, maybe mid-40s, ex-military by her posture. She listened without interrupting as I laid everything out. Wexler's cover-ups, Dylan's forged logs, the retaliatory reassignment, the confiscated laptop. When I finished, she closed her notebook. You realize this is whistleblower territory, right? I realize I've got nothing left to lose. She nodded slowly. Then you'd better document everything twice. Command eats its own. Before she left, she handed me a burner phone. If anything happens, anything, call this number, not your chain of command. That sentence hit harder than any salute. Back on base, I felt eyes everywhere. Emails vanished mid-draft. My card access sometimes failed for minutes before working again. It was subtle, enough to gaslight you into thinking you were paranoid. But I wasn't paranoid. I was targeted. One night, my car alarm went off at 2 a.m. When I checked, nothing was stolen, just the passenger seat slashed open, knife marks deep and deliberate. On the dashboard sat an empty flash drive. Message received. The breaking point. 3 months later, the Air Force Personnel Center sent notice. Intent to discharge, General, under honorable conditions. Translation. You're done, but we'll let you keep your benefits so you don't sue. I appealed, of course, but the process was ceremonial at best. Wexler's deployment performance review glowed. Dylan had just been promoted. Meanwhile, my file looked like a cautionary tale for new recruits. That night, I packed my dorm into 3 boxes. When I turned in my base ID, the guard scanned it, frowned, and said, "Sorry, man. Hate when good ones get chewed up." I almost laughed. Good ones don't get chewed up. They get repurposed into scapegoats. The exit interview was worse. Wexler sat across from me, crisp blues, metals reflecting fluorescent light. He slid a stack of papers forward. Sign these and we'll finalize your out-processing. I flipped through. One clause caught my eye. Non-disclosure agreement concerning maintenance investigations. I looked up. You're gag ordering me? Standard procedure, he said. Prevents misinformation. Or it prevents accountability. His smile thinned. Careful, Sergeant. You're already one step from civilian. I leaned forward, voice low. Then maybe it's time I start acting like one. He didn't reply. Just tapped the pen toward me. I signed, fake, slow, deliberate. He didn't notice I used my middle initial wrong. I walked out of that room stripped of everything but one conviction. If integrity had cost me my uniform, then integrity would have to be my weapon now. I mailed Ms. Vargas another package. Copies of the hidden logs, the forged authorizations, and a transcript of my conversation with Wexler recorded on my phone. 2 days later, she texted only one word, received. Civilian limbo the day I left base housing. It rained like the sky was trying to wash the Air Force off me. I tossed my duffel into a beat-up Ford and just drove. No destination, just motion. I ended up in Colorado Springs, near Peterson Space Force Base, renting a room over a garage from an old veteran named Hank. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any. The first few weeks were hell. I'd wake up at 0500 out of habit, half expecting formation. The silence afterward felt heavier than jet engines. Claire called once. I let it ring out. She texted, "I'm sorry for everything. I never meant for it to go that far." I deleted it. Forgiveness wasn't my job anymore. Then out of nowhere, Ms. Vargas called. "You sitting down, Sergeant?" "Not since they kicked me out." She chuckled softly. "Well, sit now." IG's opening a preliminary inquiry. They found inconsistencies in Wexler's deployment records. Your evidence helped. My heart hammered. Does that mean? Don't get ahead of yourself. It means they're looking. But you might want to stay under the radar for a while. Understood. When the call ended, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not victory. Not relief. Just oxygen. I picked up work at a civilian aircraft repair shop. Low pay, long hours, no politics. The owner, an old Navy mechanic named Curtis, didn't care about my past. He cared about torque specs and results. "You fix clean," he he said one night, watching me recalibrate a sensor. Military? Was. He nodded. You miss it? I thought for a long time. I miss believing it meant something. He didn't press. That kind of understanding doesn't need words. Every night, I wrote down everything I remembered. Conversations, dates, smells of hangars, the way Wexler's eyes flicked left before lying. I wasn't sure if I was preparing for war or therapy. Then, 6 months after discharge, a brown envelope arrived, no return address. Inside, photocopies of internal memos. Header, Department of the Air Force, Office of the Inspector General. Words blurred as I read. Subject Wexler R. Under review for falsification of maintenance reports, misuse of authority, and retaliation against subordinate personnel. I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. Proof that the truth had claws. At the bottom was a note in Ms. Vargas's handwriting. Keep your head down. The storm's just starting. For the first time in a year, I slept through the night. The Air Force taught me how to troubleshoot everything except people. A jet malfunctions, you isolate the fault. A person malfunctions, you isolate yourself. But isolation sharpens you. You start hearing the hum beneath silence, the sound of a man planning his return. The envelope from the IG didn't fix anything. It didn't give me back my rank, my reputation, or my life. But it validated my insanity. I hadn't imagined it. Wexler was under review. Dylan's name appeared twice in the supporting documentation as a relevant witness. That was enough to light the fuse. I spent the next weeks in civilian rhythm, grease under my nails, metal dust on my boots, Hank's old radio humming country static in the background. But after dark, I'd sit in my garage with a single desk lamp and dissect the digital carcass of my past life. The flash drive I'd mailed to myself was still intact, the real warhead. Inside were hundreds of files showing identical forged authorizations across 3 deployments. If Command wanted to pretend I was the problem, I'd make sure the whole system saw the truth. Ms. Vargas called again one Friday night. You didn't hear this from me, she said, voice hushed like someone who's checked her blinds twice. IG's audit team found over 30 falsified readiness reports tied to Wexler's command. They're stalling release until legal reviews are done. How long? Months, maybe a year. A year. Long enough for reputations to fade and evidence to accidentally disappear. What about Dylan? Still serving. Rumor is he's being considered for technical sergeant. I laughed, one of those dry, broken laughs that doesn't sound human. She hesitated. Evan, I know you want justice. But be careful. When officers fall, they pull everyone near them down. I'm already down, I said. The civilian trap. You think freedom feels like open sky. Turns out, it feels like unpaid rent and cheap beer. I lived from paycheck to paycheck, fixing aircraft older than me, haunted by a system that still called me under honorable conditions. A phrase so neutral it stung. Claire's name came up again through mutual friends. Apparently, she and Dylan were taking a break. I didn't react. Not because I didn't care, because caring would have meant I hadn't learned a damn thing. Then one morning, Curtis tossed me a newspaper clipping. Hey, that your old CO. Front page. Air Force Captain Ronald Wexler recognized for maintenance excellence overseas. A photo of him shaking hands with a general, both smiling like saints. My stomach turned. I went home that night and stared at my reflection. Tired eyes, unshaven jaw, the faint ghost of the uniform collar that used to sit on my neck. If the system rewarded corruption, then maybe it needed a different kind of accountability. The digital battlefield. I still had friends on the inside, quiet ones, ghosts in their own right. One was Airman First Class Nolan, a cyber tech who owed me a favor from a busted avionics patch years back. He answered my coded email with a single line. Meet at the diner off State Route 14. Midnight. We sat in a booth under flickering neon, 2 conspirators pretending to be insomniacs. You're playing with fire, he said, sliding a thumb drive across the table. I prefer electricity, I replied. The drive contained leaked audit schedules and server snapshots from Kuwait operations. Nolan didn't say how he got them, and I didn't ask. But the files showed data manipulation patterns linking straight to Wexler's user ID. Deliberate falsifications to meet readiness metrics. You release this online, you'll burn the whole wing, Nolan warned. That's the idea. Then at least let me mask your trace. You've already lost one career. Don't lose your freedom. He typed fast, encrypting layers like armor. When he was done, he looked at me hard. You sure this is worth it? I thought about the slash seat in my car. The letter of reprimand. The silence from Claire. Yeah, I said. It's worth it. The leak. I didn't dump the files publicly. Too easy for them to spin it as a rogue ex-airman vendetta. Instead, I sent them, anonymously, to 3 places. The Air Force Times Investigative Desk. A Defense Department Oversight email. A veteran-run podcast called Frontline Shadows. Then I waited. Days passed. Nothing. Then a week. Then suddenly noise. Twitter, X, lit up. Whistleblower leaks claim data tampering in F-35 maintenance logs under Air Force Captain RW. Sources say subordinate was discharged after refusing to falsify reports. My phone exploded. Unknown numbers. Reporters. Even former squadron members texting. Is this you? I ignored them all. Let the system talk to itself for once. By evening, Wexler's name was trending on Mill Twitter. The base PR office issued a no comment. That was the first victory that felt real. 2 days later, Nolan messaged me. They're locking accounts. Wexler's losing his command. I stared at that text until the words blurred. It didn't feel like triumph, more like a silent exhale after holding your breath for too long. Repercussions. When the Air Force investigates itself, it never apologizes, it rebrands. The official statement said, in light of new evidence, a leadership restructuring is underway. No mention of me, or the years they'd buried the truth under paperwork. but whispers travel. Hank showed me a thread on Reddit/military stories one night. Someone claiming to be an active duty mechanic wrote, "Our last commander got canned for cooking numbers. Rumor says a grounded tech from Hill AFB exposed him. Whoever you are, brother, you saved lives." I stared at the screen, heart hammering. There it was, the quiet revenge I never expected to taste. Then came the counterattack. One morning, I stepped out to find an unmarked sedan parked across the street. Same car, 3 days in a row. Different driver each time. The Air Force doesn't do subtle intimidation well. They outsource it to civilians. On the 4th day, I walked right up to the window. The guy rolled it down halfway. "Problem?" I asked. "Just routine surveillance," he said with a smile that wasn't. I leaned closer. "Then surveil this." I snapped a photo of his license plate and walked away. They didn't come back. Claire. I hadn't thought about her in months until she showed up at the hangar one evening. I was closing up shop when I heard that voice, soft, careful. "Evan." She looked different, shorter hair, tired eyes, regret stitched into every word. "I heard what happened," she said. "About the investigation. About you being right." I wiped my hands on a rag. "That's supposed to fix something?" "No," she whispered. But I had to say it. There was silence, heavy but not hostile. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a photo, me and her at the Great Salt Lake, the day before my first deployment. "I kept it," she said. "Even when everything fell apart." I stared at the photo. We looked stupidly happy, unaware that the world could turn on such tiny hinges. I handed it back. "Keep it. You'll need a reminder." She blinked, confused. "Of what?" "That you once knew someone who didn't sell out." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded and left. I watched her taillights disappear and felt nothing. That was how I knew I'd healed, not because the pain was gone, but because I no longer needed it to feel alive. Wexler's fall. Months later, the Air Force Times published the official findings. Captain Ronald Wexler relieved of command following confirmed falsification of maintenance data and retaliatory behavior against subordinate personnel. Dylan Reeves was demoted and reassigned. The report mentioned a staff sergeant identified as a whistleblower, name withheld for privacy. I didn't need credit. Their downfall was enough music. Still, one part made me laugh bitterly. Leadership commends the integrity of airmen who uphold Air Force core values. Core values. The same slogan they used when they ruined me. At least now it cut both ways. The letter. A week later, I got mail from the Department of the Air Force. Inside, a formal apology, printed, signed, bureaucratically soulless but real. "Upon review, your discharge is hereby upgraded to honorable. All records amended accordingly." I sat there staring at it, fingers trembling. 8 years of service. 2 years of hell. One sheet of paper to rewrite it all. Hank poured 2 whiskeys. "So what now, Staff Sergeant?" "Just Evan," I said. "And I don't know." He raised his glass. "To knowing you were right." We drank in silence, the kind that doesn't sting anymore. The new mission. Justice had taken everything I was and given me back something quieter, sharper. I realized I didn't want back in. I wanted forward. I used my savings to rent a small hangar outside town and started a side business, Mercer Aviation Repair. My motto was simple: integrity doesn't need clearance. Old vets and private pilots came by for work they couldn't trust to dealerships. Word spread fast. Turns out, honesty is good for business when you've got the scars to prove it. Sometimes young airmen would show up too, whispering stories about new commanders pulling the same tricks. I'd listen, fix their parts, and tell them the one thing nobody told me. Don't let loyalty make you blind. The uniform is cloth, your name is permanent. Then one afternoon, a package arrived with no sender. Inside, a single dog tag. Not mine. Not Hank's. Engraved with Reeves D. USAF, and beneath it, a folded note. He resigned. Said you were right. I placed the tag on my workbench, right next to the first avionics panel I ever fixed. The 2 pieces of metal gleamed under the same light. One symbol of what I'd built, the other of what I'd survived. That night, I stood outside the hangar watching a small Cessna take off. Its engine roar sounded like closure, steady, clean, unapologetic. I whispered, "Still grounded, huh?" to myself and smiled. Because sometimes being grounded means you finally found solid ground. Freedom felt strange at first. No reveille. No salutes. No one barking my name across the flight line. Just open sky and silence that didn't demand obedience. I thought I'd missed the noise. Turns out, silence is the only rank that never lies. The workshop. Mercer Aviation Repair started as a hobby, then became therapy, then, somehow, a living. Hank let me rent half his barn for cheap. I bought a used hydraulic lift from a scrapyard and bolted it to a concrete slab myself. First customers were crop duster pilots who couldn't afford corporate maintenance. They'd show up with grease-stained hats, call me Sergeant, and pay in cash or beer. Word spread through veteran circles. Soon I was fixing everything from bush planes to drone frames, anything with wiring that hummed. People liked that I listened before touching a bolt. Maybe that's what being betrayed teaches you. You start hearing the fear behind every vibration. At night, I kept a notebook labeled, "The Things They Never Taught Us." Inside lessons. Not about torque values or checklists, but survival codes. Like, never assume loyalty from someone who benefits from your silence. Truth doesn't need rank insignia. Some wars are fought after discharge. Veterans and ghosts. They started finding me, veterans, ex-airmen, sailors, Marines, guys the system chewed up and spat out. They came under the pretext of aircraft repair, but what they really needed was to talk. There was Sergeant Heller, who got blamed for a missing weapons crate he never signed for. Petty Officer Lane, dishonorably discharged for insubordination after reporting harassment. and a young airman named Torres who reminded me of myself at 22, eager, proud, terrified of screwing up. He told me his CO made him sign off on avionics inspections he didn't perform to save time. When he refused, they called him unstable. Sound familiar? I asked. He nodded, eyes wide. I wrote down the number for Ms. Vargas on a scrap of sandpaper and slid it across the table. Tell her I sent you. She listens. That became my new mission, teaching broken soldiers how to fight smart instead of loud. The conference. A year later, Ms. Vargas called again. Evan, how's civilian life treating you? Less bureaucracy, more caffeine. She laughed. Listen, the IG's hosting a closed-door session for whistleblower case studies. They want someone to speak anonymously about retaliation culture. Interested? I hesitated. You want me to go back into the belly of the beast? Not as prey, she said. As proof. So I went. It was held in D.C., conference room with stale donuts and colder air. People in suits scribbled notes while acronyms flew like shrapnel. When it was my turn, I didn't read from paper. I just told the truth. How loyalty can mutate into silence, how corruption hides behind efficiency, how one forged signature can cost a man his purpose. When I finished, the room was dead quiet. Then someone started clapping. Not polite, genuine. For the first time since the Air Force, I felt like my words carried weight instead of paperwork. Afterward, a colonel shook my hand. You ever think about coming back in, Mr. Mercer? Civilian contractor, oversight division maybe? I smiled. Sir, if I come back, who's going to fix your planes honestly? He laughed, but I meant every word. The reunion 6 months later, I got an invitation I didn't expect. The 57th Squadron reunion, Hill AFB, Hangar 5. Part of me wanted to burn it. Another part needed to see if the ghosts were still there. I went. Same base, same smell of jet fuel, but it felt smaller now, like walking through a set I'd already outgrown. I saw Dylan across the hangar, older, clean-shaven, rank patch missing. He looked at me like a man seeing his own obituary. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then he walked over slow. Didn't think you'd show, he said. Didn't think you'd be sober, I answered. He huffed a laugh. Fair. Look, you were right. About all of it. Wexler, the logs, everything. He offered me protection if I played along. I was stupid. You were ambitious, I said. Stupidity's curable. Ambition isn't. He swallowed. They took my stripes. I'm working warehouse detail now. Guess we both got demoted, I said. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a check. $10,000. What's this? Back pay from a settlement they gave me after the investigation. Figured you earned half. I looked at it, then tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. Keep it. I already got my payment. For what? Sleeping at night. He didn't argue. Just nodded and walked away, lighter somehow. The letter from Claire. I thought the past was finished until the envelope showed up. Handwritten, no return address, same cursive I once memorized. Evan, I saw your name in an article about whistleblowers. I didn't know how strong you were until I watched you fall and still stand up straighter than everyone else. I'm married now. I'm not writing to reopen anything. I just wanted to thank you for proving that doing the right thing still matters. You were my lesson in integrity. See, I read it once, folded it neatly, and slid it under the dog tag on my workbench. No hate left. No love either. Just quiet acknowledgement between two survivors of the same wreck. The new crew. By year 3, the hangar had grown. Hank became my unofficial foreman. Torres joined full-time after leaving active duty. We called ourselves the Grounded Ones. We specialized in restoration, planes too old or too damaged for official service. Resurrecting the forgotten, Hank liked to say. One summer evening, a father brought his teenage daughter to the shop. She'd built a model jet for a school project and wanted to see a real one. When she asked what I used to do, I told her. I kept planes honest. She laughed. Planes can lie. Oh yeah, I said. But only if the people behind them do. Her dad smiled like he understood. Maybe he did. The visit one fall afternoon, a black SUV pulled up outside the hangar. 2 officers stepped out, Colonel Tabb's crisp blues. For a second, I thought they'd come to revoke something again. The taller one said, Mr. Mercer, on behalf of Air Force Material Command, we'd like to thank you for your service and your courage. Your case directly influenced new whistleblower protections in the 2027 Defense Ethics Act. He handed me a framed certificate. My name spelled correctly this time. I stared at it, half amused, half stunned. So I'm a cautionary tale and a role model now? The colonel grinned. That's usually how change happens. After they left, Hank shook his head. Look at that. The same folks who buried you now building monuments in your honor. Let them, I said. Graves make great foundations. The memorial flight. A year later, Torres suggested we take the restored Cessna up for a commemorative run, our first flight since the shop opened. I hadn't been in the cockpit since discharge. My hands trembled when I touched the yoke, muscle memory colliding with ghosts. We took off at sunset. The sky stretched wide, burning gold, the world below shrinking until every base, every betrayal looked small. For a moment, I forgot everything. Just lift, air, freedom. Torres looked over, grinning. Feels good, huh, boss? Yeah, I said, voice rough. Feels earned. We circled once over the mountains, then leveled out. Down below, my hangar roof glowed orange in the fading light, the words Mercer Aviation painted in white letters. I'd built that with my hands, no signatures forged, no lies told. When we landed, Hank handed me a beer and said, You think Wexler ever dreams about you? Maybe, I said. But I sleep better than he does. The final lesson. I started writing again. Not reports, stories. Anonymous posts on veteran forums under the handle Grounded Sergeant. Each story a confession disguised as advice. How to survive dishonor, how to rebuild self-worth, how to find meaning outside rank. People started messaging back, hundreds of them. Some said my post stopped them from quitting. One said it stopped him from ending everything. That's when I realized revenge wasn't the opposite of peace. It was the bridge to it. You cross it, burn it, and keep walking. Ms. Vargas, one last time. I called her after 2 years of silence. She sounded older, tired but proud. They finally closed the Wexler case, she said. He's barred from federal employment. Full stop. Justice served. I asked. Justice documented, she corrected. Then, you ever think about working in oversight again? We could use someone who knows what integrity costs. I looked around my hangar, planes shining under warm light, Torres laughing in the background, Hank cursing at a wrench. This is oversight, I said. Just with better company. She laughed softly. Keep flying, Mercer. Already am. A quiet evening. That night, I sat on the roof of the hangar with a thermos of coffee and watched contrails cut the twilight. Each one a reminder that flight is impossible without resistance. I thought about the kid I used to be, the one who believed the system was sacred. He died somewhere between Al Dafra and Hill AFB. Good riddance. The man left behind learned something better. That honor doesn't come from the oath. It comes from surviving what breaks it. Below me, the dog tag still sat on the workbench beside Claire's letter. 2 ghosts. I took them both outside, dug a small hole near the runway, and buried them together. No ceremony, no words. Just dirt over metal and paper. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of oil and sagebrush. For the first time in years, it didn't smell like war. There's a sound pilots never forget, the hum right before takeoff. It's the moment between stillness and motion, control and surrender. That's what my life felt like now. Not flying, not falling. Just balanced perfectly in the middle. The invitation. 3 years after I opened Mercer Aviation, I got a letter with an official seal. Inside, the Department of the Air Force requests your presence at the annual Integrity and Leadership Symposium. You will receive recognition for your contribution to transparency and ethics in military maintenance operations. I almost laughed out loud. They'd once called me a liability. Now they wanted me as a keynote speaker. Hank saw the envelope and whistled. Gonna take it? I haven't decided, I said. Seems poetic, he grinned. They dug your grave and now they're building you a podium. He wasn't wrong. The speech. I went. Not for them, for me. I wanted to look that machine in the eye and know it couldn't touch me anymore. The auditorium was packed with officers, cadets, analysts, the kind of people who believed in chain of command justice. When they introduced me as former Staff Sergeant Evan Mercer, aviation technician and advocate for integrity, the applause felt surreal. I walked to the podium, adjusted the mic, and said the first honest thing that came to mind. I didn't come here to tell you how to be good airmen. I came to tell you what it costs to stay one. The room went silent. I told them everything, without names, without bitterness. How rules can hide sins, how loyalty can be weaponized, how silence kills more careers than incompetence ever will. Then I ended with this. If integrity is your core value, you better build a spine to hold it. Because when it breaks, there's no maintenance manual for the pieces. When I stepped off stage, some of the cadets looked at me the way I used to look at pilots, like I just told them the truth they weren't supposed to hear. That was enough. The offer. Afterward, a general in his 60s approached me. Weathered face, ribbons like history books. Mercer, he said, you ever think about consulting for the department? We could use a man like you. I smiled politely. Sir, I'm already consulting for myself. He laughed, but his eyes stayed serious. You turned pain into a compass. Don't waste that. I didn't. But I kept my compass pointed away from the bureaucracy that tried to kill me. The return. On the way back to Colorado, I detoured to Utah. Hill AFB. The gate guard didn't recognize me, but the landscape did, the same dry wind, the same hangars, ghosts whispering in the air. I parked outside the fence and just watched a squadron of F-35s taxi down the runway. Same roar that used to fill my chest. Only now it didn't own me. I whispered under my breath, still flying, huh? Good. Then I turned the key and left. Closure isn't a ceremony, it's a decision. Hank's last flight. A year later, Hank passed away quietly in his sleep. We buried him on a hill overlooking the airfield. His headstone read, mechanic. Mentor. Man of his word. After the service, I sat by his grave until sunset. He'd once told me, engines and people both need friction to run right. I finally understood. Back at the hangar, I hung his wrench above the door next to my discharge letter. One represented the work we loved. The other, the price we paid for doing it right. Torres looked up at it and said, you think it ever gets easier? I shook my head. No, but it gets quieter. Letters from the sky. Months later, emails started arriving from airmen I'd never met. Some thanked me for giving them courage to report. Others said they'd read my posts under Grounded Sergeant and found hope in them. One message stood out. Sir, I'm stationed at Al Dafra now. We changed how we log maintenance after reading about your case. Our CO actually says, do it by the Mercer Standard. Thought you should know. I read that line 3 times. The Mercer Standard. The phrase that once ruined me now protected others. That was the closest thing to redemption I'd ever need. A visit from the past. One spring afternoon, I was under a wing, tightening a bolt, when a shadow blocked the light. Boots. Polished. Military issue. Mind if I come in? A voice asked. I slid out from under the fuselage and froze. It was Wexler. Older, thinner, civilian suit instead of blues. His eyes had the look of a man who'd lost command of everything but guilt. What do you want? I asked. He looked around the hangar, then back at me. Closure. I almost laughed. You think showing up here gives you that? He sighed. They took my pension, my rank. I work logistics for a trucking company now. Thought I should face the man I wronged. You didn't wrong a man, I said. You wronged the idea of one. He nodded slowly. You still talk like a soldier. No, like someone who survived one. He took something out of his pocket, a folded apology letter printed on Air Force letterhead and signed. They drafted this for me to send you when the investigation ended. I never did. Why bring it now? Because I'm tired of carrying it. He handed it to me. I didn't take it. Instead, I wiped my hands on a rag and said, you can leave it on the bench. He did. Before walking out, he paused. You were right about integrity. It's heavier than rank. After he left, I burned the letter. Some apologies don't need air, they need ashes. Legacy. 2 years later, the shop became a training site for veterans transitioning to civilian aviation work. We called it Project Grounded. Funded by donations, run by ex-service members who knew what it meant to rebuild. We taught mechanics, sure, but also how to write resumes, how to sleep again, how to be human. One afternoon, Torres pulled me aside, grinning. Boss, we just got our 100th graduate hired. I nodded, throat tight. You remember when this was just a barn? Yeah, he said. Now it's a launch pad. Sometimes revenge doesn't roar, it rebuilds. The final flight. On the 5th anniversary of Mercer Aviation, we took all the graduates up for a commemorative flyover. Dozens of small planes painting white arcs across a blue sky. From the ground, the pattern looked like wings opening. I flew lead in Hank's old Cessna, Torres on my 6. As we broke formation and banked toward the horizon, the radio crackled. Boss, Torres said, what do we call this maneuver again? I smiled. Freedom check. We laughed, voices carried by the wind. Below, the runway shimmered like a memory I didn't belong to anymore. For the first time since the Air Force, I felt light. Not because I'd escaped gravity, because I'd made peace with it. The quiet night. Back on the ground, I stayed in the hangar alone. The others had gone to celebrate, but I wasn't ready for noise. I walked to the old workbench where Wexler's burned letter had left a faint scorch mark. Next to it sat Hank's wrench and the framed certificate the Air Force had mailed me years ago. I picked up the certificate, looked at my name printed in serif font, and whispered, "You don't owe me anymore." Then I tucked it behind a toolbox and turned off the light. Outside, the night hummed like an engine idling, steady alive. I lay on the runway and stared at the stars. They looked like rivets holding the sky together. The confession. If you've made it this far, maybe you understand why I'm writing this. Not for sympathy. Not even for justice. For clarity. Because every soldier who's been betrayed by the system deserves to hear one truth. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are simply in a war that doesn't hand out medals. They can strip your uniform, your rank, your name off a roster, but they can't erase the version of you that chose truth over comfort. That version wins in silence. That version flies without wings. So here it is, my final maintenance note to whoever reads this. System integrity, compromised but functional. Operator, still grounded. Status, mission complete. Years later, kids from Project Grounded kept the hangar running. They renamed it Mercer Field, painted the motto across the wall. Integrity doesn't need clearance. Sometimes, when the sun sets and the mountains turn copper, I hear the echo of jets overhead. I stop whatever I'm doing and watch them disappear into the clouds. Not with envy, just respect. Because flight belongs to whoever earns it, not whoever's authorized for it. And in those quiet moments, I can almost hear Hank laughing, Claire's voice fading, Dylan's dog tag clinking in the wind. Every betrayal, every scar, every late-night confession, they're all part of the same engine now. It took me years to realize revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about refusing to let them destroy me. So when people ask if I miss the Air Force, I tell them the truth. No, but I still wake up every day ready for takeoff.